Has player empowerment gone too far? Yes. In all seriousness, though, I think we are all pretty much in agreement that things are a little out of control as they presently are. Forget star players like Kevin Durant, James Harden, Kyrie Irving. We now have role players like Kevin Love and Jay Crowder making demands as if they are star players. And I know the Cavs organization wanted to do right by Kevin Love after all the time that he's been there, but he was still only averaging like 8 points a game during his time there. And it's not as if the Cavs are even bad this season. They have a real puncher's chance at making a conference finals run this year. So even though he had kind of fallen out of the rotation with them, they were still only just one injury away from really needing him in a major way. So the whole requesting a buyout thing on the Kevin Love end is just a little strange to me. But the one that really killed me this season, and honestly, I don't think it got talked about as much as it should have, was Jay Crowder. Crowder was on a contender in the Suns and basically held out until he got traded. And the Suns were just happy to send him home and pay him until they found a trade, which is still just mind blowing to me that a player of Jay Crowder's stature can pull a move like that off. And when stuff like that is going on, it would be hard to say that things aren't at least a little bit out of control in terms of player empowerment. But are things as bad as they seem? And what can we even do to fix it? I was listening to a podcast recently where the hosts were just killing like the modern star player for exerting their power and using that as a jumping point to move teams. And that got me thinking, what do we expect star players in the league to do? What does a perfect world even look like? I've seen talking heads over at ESPN say things like players need to honor their contracts. If you sign a contract, you should fully commit for the duration of that contract. But in the past, guys have gotten crushed when they do exactly that. Think back to Kevin Durant when he left for the Nets or when he left for the Warriors. When Durant left the Thunder, he got killed by the media and the fans. And a lot of that was fair just because of the fact that the team he was heading to had just set the record for regular season wins. But we still get the whole loyalty spiel. And then when Kevin Durant left the Warriors to go to Brooklyn, he still got criticism. How could he leave the perfect basketball situation? And I guess winning championships isn't the most important thing to him. It are the types of quotes I would hear on shows like First Take. Go back to when LeBron left Cleveland for Miami, and he was likely the athlete that has received the most criticism I have seen in my lifetime for something that wasn't either a scandal or some point shaving, cheating type situation. He honored his contract with the Cavs and got absolutely eviscerated by the media and fans. And from what I remember, the common criticisms were the super team thing, something about players putting together a super team as opposed to a GM doing it really irked a lot of people. And in LeBron's defense, the Cavs never really were able to get a supporting cast around him that had a chance at winning a championship during that first Cleveland stint. So I don't really blame him for wanting to kind of take matters into his own hands and kind of put together a team on his own. But nevertheless, that bothered a lot of people. There was also the classic loyalty criticism, but there was also this component where it was like, how dare you not give the Cavs a heads up and not allow them to trade you or prepare for this scenario of you walking out the door? So players noticed that last point, that playing out your contract and just kind of blindsiding the team without giving them a chance to salvage this situation, that's unacceptable. So a few years later, Paul George is unhappy in Indiana. He has 1 year left on his deal, and he says, I'll do the organization a solid here. I'm going to let them know that I'm leaving and that I'm going to sign with the Lakers, or that at least that's my intention. Sort of the best of both worlds. He plays out most of his contract and agrees to play out the entirety of the contract and gives the team enough of a heads up that they can kind of make a decision whether they want to ride this thing out or trade him and try to salvage the situation from an asset perspective from his departure. It seems like the right thing to do as a player, but of course that wasn't the right thing to do. It was, how dare you demand a trade to a specific team? Now the organization has no leverage in a potential trade. They can only deal with the one team since no one is going to bid that highly for a 1 year rental. That was all I heard during that whole media cycle. So Playing out your contract and leaving is not a good option. Playing out most of your contract and being upfront with the organization about your intentions and not wanting to resign, that's no good. So that leaves us with demanding a trade right after you sign the extension. And the only player I can think of off the top of my head doing that is Ben Simmons with the 76ers. He obviously got killed by the media, but that's such a weird situation with a bunch of other factors. It probably isn't the best example. So just imagine somebody like Zach LaVine or Bradley Beal demanding a trade this offseason. Can you imagine the backlash we would hear, particularly for Beal? I can already hear it now. Why didn't you leave when you had the chance? It must just be all about the money for you, yada, yada, yada. I guess everyone is supposed to stay with the team that drafts them or trades for them no matter what. And for us as fans, would that really be better for us? Because it certainly isn't going to be better for the players. In a league where so much of your value is measured on how many championships you win during your career, how can we expect players to just be happy to stay on crappy teams for their entire career with no hope of ever winning anything? Even if you remain loyal your entire career, you aren't immune to criticism. Look at guys like John Stockton. He's the all-time leader in assists and steals, but isn't even mentioned in the all-time point guard conversation because he never won a championship. Tracy McGrady was left off the All-NBA 75th anniversary team due to a lack of playoff success during his career. And at the point in T-Mac's career where he was healthy enough and good enough to make a difference in the playoffs, he was stuck carrying crummy Orlando teams. Damian Lillard is going to be the modern casualty of this, and I'm already starting to see some criticism kind of levied his way for his loyalty to Portland. People are starting to throw things out there like, oh, winning doesn't matter to him, or it's just about the money, those classic things that we hear when players sign big contracts. From a fan's perspective, would it have been better for us if LeBron just stays in Cleveland his entire career and year after year he's forced to carry this mediocre Cavs team that just never has a chance of getting over the top? Or would it have been better if Shaq had stayed in Orlando only for Penny to get hurt, leaving Shaq to carry a small market, relatively new franchise, and it would have deprived us of the Kobe Shaq combo? Let's set aside the star players for a moment and think about somebody like Marvin Bagley. He gets drafted to the Kings, a historically incompetent team. And despite the good season that they're having this year, when Bagley was drafted, it was pretty much a disaster from the jump. The Kings seemed to have just no plan whatsoever for how they wanted to develop him or how they wanted to implement him into their system. He's been labeled as a bust now. So if he was drafted into a different situation or sent to a new team earlier on in his career, could he have lived up to his potential? Maybe, maybe not. Unfortunately, we'll never get the chance to know. My point is, players have been put in this no-win situation where no matter what they do, what decisions they make, how they try to advance their career, they get killed by the media and the fans. And by no means am I saying, as a fan of a specific team, do you have to be happy about your team's star player demanding a trade or leaving during free agency? I don't think that's the case at all. You shouldn't be happy about that. So this is mainly a criticism for the talking head media types. I'm also not saying that the system or the NBA world that we live in now is perfect, because it just isn't. I'm just simply stating the fact that I don't really understand what players are supposed to do that would make the media happy. And I also don't have any fixes in mind to make things better. I think the thing that has swung the pendulum of power towards the players has been this shift to shorter term contracts, these 4 or 5 year deals with opt outs. As an organization, you really do have to bend over backwards to keep guys happy, because the threat of them leaving is always very imminent. If someone demands a trade, you really can't just tell them to kick rocks, because they then have the opportunity to leave in a few years for nothing. So what if contracts were longer like they used to be? Well, one of the big reasons they got rid of those 6 to 7 year contracts were teams were being stupid and signing the wrong players to massive deals, and it was crippling franchises for a decade or more. Think about like the Allen Houston contract with the Knicks, or Shawn Kemp to the Cavs. The Houston contract actually inspired an entirely additional amnesty rule. Today, we still see teams giving these marginal players massive contracts for the maximum amount of years, or worse yet, giving aging stars supermax contracts. Just imagine if Oklahoma City or Washington had gave John Wall and Russell Westbrook a 7 or 8 year supermax. another 3 years of Russell Westbrook and John Wall making 50 some odd million a year would just be completely crippling to whatever franchise had the misfortune of having them at that number. And say Russ had never been traded from Oklahoma City and he was on one of those 8-year contracts, that would just be completely devastating for a small market team like the Thunder. Beyond that, the shorter contracts and this system that we currently have, it holds franchises accountable to spend money and stay competitive so that their star player does remain happy. Imagine somebody like Luka Doncic. She signs a 7-year extension with the Mavs and asks them to bring in some help. And the Mavs say, nah, we're good. We don't want to spend the money. It would just really suck to watch a generational talent waste away because the owner is too cheap and there's nothing to hold them accountable. Longer term contracts would solve a lot of the player empowerment going too far issues, but I think it creates a whole new laundry list of issues that are likely way worse. The other critique I see from the media, particularly old heads, is the loyalty conversation, which is really weird to me because I don't find that players today show any more or less loyalty than they showed in a prior era. Think about the prominent players in today's league. Sure, there are guys like James Harden, Kyrie, Kevin Durant who seem to switch teams every other year, but there are also tons of guys who are still with the team that drafted them. Guys like Stephen Curry, Luka Doncic, Giannis, Dame, Jokic, Embiid, all are in or at least very close to the top 10 of players in the league, and they're all still on the team that drafted them. Now let's look at the prior era. Sure, you had guys like Tim Duncan, Dirk Nowitzki, Kobe Bryant. They all stayed with the same team throughout their entire career, but there were also tons of prominent players in that generation who moved just as much, if not more, than the guys in the current era. Guys like Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, Ray Allen, Allen Iverson, Shaq, Jason Kidd, Vince Carter, all played with multiple teams, or in some cases, a handful of teams throughout their career. I mean, Shaq can damn near make a rainbow out of all the jerseys he wore throughout his career. And then in any era before that, it's really hard to compare things because everything was just so different, and the salary cap didn't even exist until 1985, which creates a whole different dynamic for the league in terms of team building. So things were just too different to even compare in Bird and Magic's era or anything before that. All of this to say, I think player empowerment has gone too far, and I think we can all agree on that. But I think how far gone it is has been blown way out of proportion. And I just don't see any fixes that are going to make the situation better without making something else drastically worse. But let me know what you guys think. How big of a deal is this player empowerment movement to you? And do you have any fixes? I'm genuinely very curious about that.